Hello, world, and Happy New Year. I recently visited Cuba in December, and I want to share with you the top 10 reasons why I think you should visit. It's an amazing country. I flew into Santa Clara and I stayed in Cayo Santa Maria and Havana. The number one reason that I think it's a top place to go is the Cuban people are so friendly and so helpful, and their English is so good. And I think that's partly because they do receive free education. I took a Spanish course and I was trying to practice my Spanish, and many people just responded in English, both in the tourism industry and outside of the tourist industry. I really felt like they tried to please tourists, and that's of course because of the tips, the little bit of extra income that tourism will bring in to Cuba. But the people are wonderful. They're very friendly and lovely people. The second reason why I think you should visit Cuba is the history is very interesting. I had read a bit about it before in Canada, but I really saw it from a Cuban perspective when I went. I was explained the history from a guide who was a history teacher before, and they explained that Cuba was colonized by the Spanish, by the British, and then pseudo colonized by the Americans. And they explained the whole history of Che, and of course now Cuba is run by the Castro family, and a lot of history behind that. And it was really interesting to hear it from a Cuban perspective. So I recommend you go just to learn about the history, because I think the history will change after the Castro family gets older and perhaps passes away. So I think now is the time to go. Especially, I think tourism is going to get a lot busier because I've heard that America has just opened up to go and visit and trade with Cuba. So I really recommend now going, especially to learn about the history, and it's not won't be as busy with tourism. The third reason I think you should go to Cuba is, in my opinion, it's incredibly safe and you don't hear of any corruption. Um, I didn't see a lot of begging, and people didn't come up to me and beg for things. I found there's usually more begging when I go south of the border into America, which is only about 1 hour away from where I live, than I found in Cuba. You feel very, very safe. Um, I felt in Cuba, as I think in many South American places, sexuality is a bit more open and a bit more free than what we're used to in perhaps a Western culture. So I think if you're a woman going alone, you might be called at or given compliments, which might not happen to you in the West. Knowing a little bit of Spanish helps. That did happen to me a little bit. Men were very friendly, more friendly than what I'm used to in the West, but never felt unsafe, and people generally listened when you said to leave you alone. If you go with a male, that might help as well. And one of the main reasons, number four, why I chose to go to Cuba is the tropical weather. It is sunny and hot and 30 degrees in their winter. You see the Cubans wearing full dark trousers, and you see them wearing, cover up cardigans, and all of the other Canadians and Europeans that I met are wearing shorts and tank tops. It's so hot, so sunny. It's a wonderful climate. Number five, which has to do with beautiful weather, is the wonderful white sand beaches. The beaches I stayed at in Cayo Santa Maria had white sand crystal clear blue water. There's no animals in the water. There was little fish and sometimes little jellyfish, but there's no sharks. It's wonderful to go snorkeling and swimming and out on a boat. The beaches are worth going to Cuba alone. They're fantastic. You don't get bugged on the beaches. Along with beaches, number 6 is I found there wasn't a lot of light pollution in Cuba. And so when the stars come out, it's really clear. And I would highly recommend, if you're staying somewhere where there's a beach, to go down to the beach at night. Make sure you bring a flashlight or a headlamp or something because it's very dark, and just look up at the stars. I did that twice when I was there, and it's just an incredible, non-forgettable experience, and we saw so many shooting stars. It's incredible. I've never seen the stars like how when I visited Cuba, and we have some really clear nights where I live, up in the mountains in Canada. The 7th reason why you should visit Cuba is it's inexpensive. If you're Canadian, American, European, it's very, very inexpensive. The currency used in Cuba for tourists is the Cuban convertible peso, and 1 Cuban convertible peso is equal to 1 American dollar. So you bring in your currency, your European, Canadian, American currency. There is a fee for changing American currency, but not for Canadian or European, and you get your Cuban convertible pesos back. For example, a really delicious meal, I found the average was about $4 per person. And I'm talking with wine, with 2 courses plus a dessert, $4 to $5. That's what I found. You can stay in a really nice hotel for about $25. Snacks and coffee, or about $1. So it's really inexpensive. For the whole trip, I was really, really pleased about how much it costs, and I took an internal flight from Cayo Santa Maria to Havana, and it's very, very inexpensive. More inexpensive, I think, than other places I looked into visiting. So I really recommend going. And people really appreciate little tips here and there, because I have heard make about $20 to $26 a month for most jobs. So those little tips really, really help from tourists that come and visit. And I did tip, a peso for a meal. Of course, if I went on any tours, I would tip my tour guide. If I'm sitting at a bar for a while, I would tip the bartender, and it's really appreciated. And of course, the 8th reason why you should visit Cuba is to see the really cool old cars. There's 3 kind of old cars I found in Cuba. There's, of course, the old American cars that are restored, and you can pay someone and go in this restored American car all around, mostly Havana, but I saw all the old cars everywhere I went. And I learned that they're passed down from generation to generation and restored in very interesting ways. And you see a lot of Russian cars there because of the history with the Soviet Union, with Russia and Cuba, with the crisis. And of course, you see modern cars as well. I saw the car that I drove, which is a Chevy Cruze. I saw that in Cuba. So any kind of cars there. If you do go to Cuba and you rent a car, just make sure you look into that properly. I decided not to rent a car, even though I felt like it would be easy to drive there, because there is not so many cars there compared to anywhere else I've driven or any other city I've lived in. But I read that if you get in a car accident in Cuba, it can really delay your process of leaving the country. And if someone is injured in a car accident that you're a part of, the process is quite different than in the West. So just be very cautious if you're going to rent a car. I decided not to. And the 9th reason why I think you should visit Cuba is Cuba has a very interesting way and outlook of doing things. This is the second communist country I visited. I've been to Vietnam, but I found Cuba more organized than Vietnam, and things were a bit more straightforward. Um, but it's still very, very different than like a capitalist country or a Western country and or a European country, and I really liked learning that different way. For instance, each family in Cuba, I was explained, they get rations of different food and flour, salt, and there's these little shops you can see around Cuba where each family has a little booklet, and they go to the shop and they get free supplies. And I was told that that doesn't cover everything that a family will need, but it's a huge subsidy. So people don't really starve in Cuba. You also get free education, and I do believe military service for the men 1 year after high school is mandatory, and then you get free university. I think that's how a lot of people learn English, and I thought the free education was very, very interesting and cool and positive. And then they also, Cubans all receive free medical from the government, and that includes dental and prescriptions, which I thought was really cool as a Canadian because here in Canada we do not get free dental and we do not get free medication. Unless you have a job that subsidizes that for you. You do receive free medical here in Canada, but there's still a fee attached to that. And the way it was explained to me in Cuba is it's just free medical. So I think it's worth going just to see how a country does things differently than what you might be used to or where you might have visited before. And it's interesting to see those positives. And then the 10th reason I think you should go to Cuba is because the people are gorgeous. Guys, girls, I found the people really, really good looking. One of the best looking countries I've ever been to. And it's a real mix of different ethnicities in Cuba. So you have kind of Spanish looking people, but then you have European people with like blue eyes, and then you have a mix of that, and then you have black people, and everybody mixes, and it just gives this really gorgeous look. And I think in Cuba, as I mentioned before, kind of sexuality is a bit more open and people are a bit more friendly. And I found that guys flirt more with girls, more than we're used to in the West. They did with me anyways, and they flirt with a guy. A girl will flirt with a guy even if the partner is there with them. But the people are really good looking. And a bonus kind of reason I think you should visit Cuba is the rum. The rum is amazing. I don't usually drink straight spirits, but the rum is amazing. And I visited, it used to be the Bacardi building in Havana. So Bacardi used to be made in Cuba, and then I think when the Castros took over, the Bacardi family left, but then Cuba still started producing rum, and I think it's called Havana Club. I brought back a couple bottles, and it's the smoothest tasting spirit I've ever drank. So you should, if you like rum, and I guess cigars, I'm not a big cigar fan, but the rum is amazing. And the final thing is, I think Cuba's changed a lot over the last maybe 10, 20 years. When I told people I was going to Cuba, we got a lot of advice about to bring toiletries, to bring candy, and I think that might have been the case in the 1990s. I was explained by a guide that in the 1990s, it was really difficult. Trade had stopped, and it was really hard to get anything into Cuba, food, toiletries, anything. So people would bring things to give away. But when I was in Havana, I was maybe asked twice by two women for toiletries, and I gave them some chocolate and some candies. I had brought a lot of candies to give out. and I barely gave out any. Like I mentioned before, I didn't find there was too many beggars. Honestly, in North America, I found I was harassed more than in Cuba. Knowing a little bit of Spanish will help. How to know no no thank you, no gracias, or cuánto is how much. But knowing a little tiny bit of Spanish, maybe that helped. But I don't think you need to bring a lot of toiletries or things to go away. Um, People might give you that advice, but I found I really didn't need to. So those are my top 10 reasons plus bonuses and a little bit of advice about visiting Cuba. I really, really recommend that you go now. I think that the political climate might change there after the Castros pass away, and I think it will change a lot if America opens up and starts visiting more. And I hope you have a great day. Ciao!